You're watching Elevate with Emily. I'm Emily Burnham, a marriage and family therapist. I specialize in working with couples, especially in helping them navigate the emotional dynamics that often complicate communication. And what I aim to do is teach you how to fish. There are components of therapy that I call psychoeducation that I give to my clients, and that's me telling them how things work that can help normalize their experience. And I find myself sharing very similar things across all demographics. What better way to save time than put them in videos? Because now you can access that information and apply it to your own relationship. In today's video, we're going to dive into the complexity of emotion when it enters into the picture of communication. The majority of couples I see come to me with a common dynamic that is ruining their relationship. This creates blocks in their communication, and even though they want to connect and they want to make changes and they want to understand each other, they just get stuck with the difference in their emotional dynamics. One partner tends to be more emotionally expressive. They're underregulated. They get flooded with emotion. It comes out in their tone of voice. It comes out in their action tendencies to pursue, to ask question after question, to check in, to seek out that emotion. And the other partner, when they are activated, it is more of a withdrawn, stonewalling type of behavior, where they almost numb out to emotion, where they don't feel anything, or they feel like they need to pull away, make themselves smaller, stop talking because whatever they say is wrong or makes it worse. They don't feel good enough. They feel like they're failing in some way. And the more that they pull away, the more that they are shutting down, unable to respond, perhaps even physically leaving the room, the more the partner that with the elevated emotion feels anxious and worried and is like, oh no, I'm losing them. And they feel very insecure, and so they chase that much harder, which then is seen as a threat or dangerous, and so they withdraw even harder, and they amplify this dynamic, and it becomes very escalated, and it can blow up very quickly. And then you find yourself, when you're in this dynamic duo death of communication, you find yourself never getting to discuss what was actually the problem. Now you're stuck in past examples. Well, this one time and this one time, you're stuck in this move of needing to defend yourself or prove yourself. And so you're giving examples or you're trying to over-explain yourself. And then the other partner also becomes defensive and also can become critical. And so it's this poke, blame game that just spins out of control, and you're not even addressing what the real issue was. Nor are you getting at the heart of the matter beneath all of that. That is just the tip of the iceberg. Those are the parts of communication above the waterline that you can see, but there is so much at play underneath the water. There are thoughts, perceptions, stories, meaning that we are making. There are primary emotions and secondary emotions, and those deeper attachment needs or fears, core beliefs that are driving our behavior, driving our thoughts, driving our emotional responses, often we are unaware of them, and so they go unseen. And if we are not fully aware and tuned into our own cycle, then good luck for our partner to try to understand us when we don't even understand us. And so what is so important as I work with couples is we dive into individual cycles, how, when, why we get triggered. It could be trauma from our past. It can be ruptures, pain, betrayal from our current relationship that never fully healed. And it leaves these scars that when they get poked at, flare up and become this really big deal. And so being aware of what those triggering things are for us and when we're starting to approach them before we just get completely overwhelmed and sucked into that cycle is really key. But then also being aware of how our body then responds. And a lot of this goes back to our survival brain. In our survival brain, our body focuses on the key elements that will keep us alive. And so logic, reasoning, self-control, like the best decision-making possibilities, even parts of our core values and personality get cut off. And we are just focused on how do I survive this moment. And typically we turn to two responses, right? The fight or flight. And we know there's some more nuanced ways like freeze. But basically fight or flight are those two dynamics of pursue, fight, pursue, or flee, withdraw, pull away. And that's what we're wired to do when we're under threat. And we typically have a more dominant tendency in our closest relationships and the ones that matter most to us. We're typically drawn to one or the other. Most of the time, we tend to pursue, or most of the time, we tend to withdraw. And both of those strategies make sense in context, and especially when you consider your past and why you had to learn to behave that way to protect yourself and survive. And so part of this process is making it very, very clear and overt what those strategies are, why we turn to them, and developing empathy and compassion, both for ourselves and for our partner. Understanding their responses and seeing it in a different context. They aren't the problem. You aren't the problem. This dynamic is the problem, the cycle itself. Where you guys end up when you're in the heat of it, and it's almost like you can just map it out bit by bit, like pushing one domino, and once that first domino is pushed, the rest is just history, right? Like it's gonna go ding, 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 ding. And so when you can say, hey, when you don't text me, when I expect you to be home and I start to get worried, it's very triggering for me because I know historically that when my partners didn't message me, they were cheating on me. And so even though cognitively I trust you and you haven't given me a reason to doubt you, emotionally my body starts responding to this threat of my relationship is in jeopardy, that I could lose him. And so with this panic, this fear, I start to get a little on edge. My thoughts start to spiral. I get into my survival brain and I am pursuing, and I am checking and calling you and doing things that normally in my normal state outside of my survival brain I would not do. And the best way that I can describe the survival brain in a way that helps me understand and give empathy for it is an example of swimming, and specifically drowning. But when you are in the shallow water, you're able to play, enjoy, splash each other. Both of you are fine. But as soon as someone is drowning, they lose rational thought. They just start responding and flapping around and screaming, and their breathing becomes very shallow, and they're just doing everything they can to survive. And in that panicked state, they often can't even hear what's going on around them or really remember anything that's going on around them. They are just so tunnel vision into I'm gonna die, like my life is at risk. And what can happen is the person who goes in to save them can sometimes become a target or a victim, because that person that is just floundering grabs onto them, puts them in a death choke, and is just holding on for dear life, and they both start drowning. And so here you have this well-intentioned rescuer that gets caught up in the mix of it, and now you're both drowning. And so then that person trying to rescue you has to fight back for their life now too. And so now they're poking at you, pushing, shoving, trying to get free of your death grasp. And now you're both hurting each other and you're spinning out. And no calm tone, no reasonable conversation is going to fix that, because that person drowning would never try to kill someone, right? Like they logically know I shouldn't drown someone. Like, I would never try to harm someone. I would never harm my partner that I love so much. But in that survival brain where they don't have access to that higher level of thinking and reason and logic, they lose all sense of that, and they become that primal, just instinctual, like, I'm drowning, and they do things and say things and act in ways that they would otherwise never act in. And I like that analogy, and it's not one size fits all. The dynamics can be different, right? Some relationships work where as soon as one partner starts drowning, their partner is watching on the sidelines and just leaving them to drown, or even throwing rocks at them is one that I heard. And so it's very unique, and it's very personal to your couple dynamic. But the point of that is to say, when we get on those topics that are so important, the reason they're so important is because something is at risk. There is an attachment fear. There is a need that is so important, so crucial for the relationship to maintain, continue. And so when you're getting on those really sensitive, important topic matters, and our survival brain starts to take over, it's going to go south. And quite honestly, it doesn't even matter what the topic is, just that the topic is triggering, because then you go through the same process of communication, whether you're talking about sex, whether you're talking about finances, whether you're talking about your in-laws, or an affair or a betrayal. The topic never seems to get resolved, and that's because the process is never identified and resolved. You harm each other and then just like brush it under the rug, and you're still not fully understanding what even happened, why your partner did that. You're not fully being seen and heard and understood. Your partner's not being fully seen and heard and understood. And so that rupture remains, and then often you don't know how to fix it, and so you just try to move past it. But then it can flare up again and again and again. And so how do you stop that? Well, you can't solve a problem when you don't even know what the problem is. And so you can't stop this cycle if you don't know what the cycle is, if it's not predictable, if you can't consciously point out and become aware of what you're bringing to the table, what your partner's bringing to the table, why it's happening that way, and how it reinforces that negative cycle. And so we look at the elements of emotion, we create this map, and it's very predictable. And then that allows us to step outside of that cycle and do something different, where instead of both of us drowning, we now bring floaties with us. We have preemptive and in the moment things that we can incorporate so that it doesn't end with both of us dying or hurting each other in the same ways. That's the work that I do with my couples in stage 1 of therapy. And part of that process is, yes, we need to introduce those resources, grounding, coping, resourcing types of tools that you can turn to help regulate or create the sense of security within yourself, so you don't get completely flooded or completely shut down in your survival brain, because then you can't process and do that deeper work if you don't feel safe. If you're in your survival brain and you can't access those deeper parts of your brain, you're not going to be able to heal in the way that you need to heal. And so we work to establish tools and resources, and then we work to really map out that cycle. And part of the process is experiencing in the moment different ways of communicating, so we can firsthand experientially feel and see how it works when we respond a little bit differently, when we're able to access those deeper attachment fears and express those instead of that anger that they see what's beneath that. It really builds connection, because that's what emotion is for. It's for connection. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions of emotion is that it's good or bad, that there are good emotions and there are bad emotions. Emotion is simply information. All of it is very, very useful and has a purpose. We like to feel happy. We don't like to feel in pain or sad. But both are equally useful, and like ironically maybe, sometimes those bad emotions are even more useful because they're keeping us safe or letting us know our growth areas. When we feel sadness, that is a beautiful side of love, because it is letting us know you loved that thing or that person so much. They meant so much to you. They filled your life with something. And that's why you miss it now that it's gone. And so I always tell my clients, like, if your parent died and you weren't sad, like, that's a problem. Maybe we need to get you evaluated as a psychopath, right? So these people that you love, feeling sad, we can, sit there and tell ourselves like, oh, I shouldn't feel sad. I don't want to feel sad. I don't like to feel sad, and kind of amplify it and make it worse. Or we can sit there and be like, wow, my heart feels heavy. I feel like crying. I really, really loved that person. I still do. I miss them. And we can sit with that, and then it lessens. And it's like, okay, you got the message. You're aware. You heard me. Now I can settle. And one of the most best examples ever that I can give is pain. I haven't yet met someone who loves to feel pain, yet pain is so useful. In fact, the reason it hurts so bad is a good thing, because if we could ignore pain, then we would get injured more. Our injuries would get worse. If we could, we felt this pain in our stomach, but we're like, it doesn't actually really hurt that bad. It's fine. Like, it's just like a tickle. I can, nothing, no alarms going off. Like, I'm just going to ignore it. And then, your appendix bursts or something's really wrong and you just never got it checked out. But the pain is sharp enough, distracting enough that it takes all of your senses, and literally, like, you're unable to do anything else. And so you have to pay attention to it and get the help it needs. And pain in and of itself is simply a message that there is a problem area going on. And people born without the ability to feel pain, that's actually very dangerous. They can live shorter lifespans or need hip or knee replacements earlier on in their life, because just imagine you're standing in a 3-hour line for a concert or something, and naturally, once one hip starts hurting, like, you're gonna shift to the other side. Or when one knee starts hurting, you're shifting your weight and distributing that so that those parts can rest and recover. But if you don't have that information to know that a joint is hurting, and you just keep it there in that painful position, and you're just eating away at the cartilage and destroying your knee, then you're gonna need replacement. But the pain is how you could know. The pain was how you could protect yourself. When you think about emotion like that, all emotion is helpful. And really what the biggest lie is the primitive brain. When we went over in our previous video, our primitive brain doesn't like pain. It associates pain with death, so it wants to avoid it. And so it will tell you that pain is bad. It will have you do extreme things to avoid pain. But pain in and of itself is just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger, right? And so as you're feeling that primitive, primal, survival brain start to function up, fire up, and say, hey, something's wrong here, we gotta, all hands on deck, like, this is a big deal, like, we need this, and we start to go in survival mode, as we can soothe that and be like, okay, I hear you, but really, this is what pain is. I'm gonna be okay. I'm going to heal. My body's made to heal. And this pain is simply letting me know that something's wrong, and I'm going to take care of it. You can trust me. I got this. And then it can settle and calm down. And so as we bring that capacity to handle emotions into our relationships and into our communication, we're going to be able to handle those tricky conversations. And it doesn't mean we agree with each other. It doesn't mean we're on the same page. And it doesn't even mean that we never fight. But no matter what happens, no matter our differences, we know how to find our way back to each other. Even if we do get lost in our cycle, we know how to repair. We know how to walk through what happened, map it out, own our parts of it, and let them know what was really going on, and be able to sincerely understand and empathize with each other and apologize in a way that heals and connects. So that's just a little sneak preview of the dynamics that go on in couples therapy. And what I aim to do is teach you how to fish. And again, just because you have the tools to fish doesn't mean you know how to fish. And so therapy, I think, is such a beautiful experience where we both give you the tools and then fish alongside you and help you fish and give personalized feedback and are there like co-regulating and coaching and teaching in the thick of it, but with the end goal that you become a master fisher, that you don't need therapy anymore because you've learned what you need to do to manage your brain and to communicate and live authentically. Here you get part of the equation. You can get the tools and hopefully start to apply them on your own and with your partner. But if you're struggling to really integrate it and make it work, then that's okay. Just keep trying, keep practicing, and even seek out therapy to really experience it. And my only caution too is that sometimes we go to therapy and we just rely on our therapist and they fish for us, right? And so they're like, here's like a fishing rod and here's some bait. And you're like, okay, sweet, I'm learning how to fish. But then you sit there and watch them fish and they're catching all the fish and they're doing all the work. And then you're like, you go home and then you're like, now that I'm on my own, I still don't know how to fish. Like, I thought I did. It's like when you're in school and you like the professor's doing it, you're like, yeah, this makes sense. This is totally making sense. And then you go home and then you're like, yeah, no, I don't got this. And so it's a work in progress. And the important thing is that you get your feet wet and you just try and you have that trust in your therapist and you get better and better at it in session so that it starts to bleed outside of session. You take the wheel more and more in session so that out of session you're comfortable driving. So stay tuned because in our next video, we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into the elements of emotion so that you can start using those to track your emotional cycle and start to see how it impacts your partner. And it's super, super cool and I'm so excited to share. So please like this video, share it with someone who you think would benefit from hearing about emotion and communication, and comment below with any insights or questions that you have, and I will see you in the next video.